Epilogue, 7 years later, from the story FalloutEquestria Heroes, written by no one. Serve, save, slave, slay.
And did you find it?
I leaned back in my seat, watching the pony in front of me curiously. I wasn't happy with Ponytron-only security, so years ago I set up an internal policing force. With the council's blessing, of course. This mare was one of my latest recruits, and for the life of me I couldn't remember her name. Cherry... something?
No, ma'am.
She shook her head while she stared at the floor. If only she knew how weak I had become, she'd not be shaking the way she was.
The rifle we found wasn't to the specs you described. The pony was reprimanded and the goods confiscated. Pay a market value for the goods you took.
The mare looked up at me, finally, in shock.
I can't have him lying about selling relics from the war, but we also can't steal. Tell the captain I want him paid.
The mare was still staring at me with a gormless look on her face.
Now! Yes, ma'am.
She stood stiffly to attention before near galloping from the room. I couldn't help but roll my eyes at her antics. My history from the war preceded me, and ever since it was my job to put down the occasional rebels or attempted coup. As few as there had been. My actions brought awe because they didn't know the truth. I took the file from my desk and looked it over. The only word on the front was subtlety. Ever since my fight atop the Clips and Clops, I had been looking for it. But now it was too late. I had a council meeting to attend, and then I'd leave the city for the last time. I gently tossed the file into the trash and started to stand. It took a few seconds of aches and pains for me to force myself into a standing position. Not even Med-X could keep the pain at bay. My joints ached more and more every day, and when I looked down at my barding I could see it. Seeping out from under the edges of my clothes. Bright blue lines, like veins. They had been growing, close to covering me completely. With the healing mega-spell inside me gone, there was little except my own fortitude to keep the star metal poison at bay. And now that was failing too. I was dying.
So, where should we start?
You're interviewing me, remember? You aren't very good at this.
Very funny. All right, state your name and your relationship to Hired Gun.
Name's Flair, obviously. Hired Gun is my best friend and closest confidant. Even if she is as dumb as the rocks on her flank.
All right, and then it was... Right, so where have you been since the Battle for Dice?
These past few years I've been working with the Enclave, trying to rebuild our reputation. A flawed endeavor, but they were always my family, so I had to try, right? Poor stupid Flair throwing his life away for a lost cause. Feel free to weep for me.
I'll get right on it. Jeez. All right, final question. What do you think of Hired Gun? Answer truthfully, please.
She was an idiot. A violent, reckless fool who nearly got me and you killed countless times. But she was my friend, as close as I ever gotten. I trust her with my life. That said, you and I know she has done some, let's charitably call it questionable things. It makes me uncomfortable when people praise her without thought. And let me just add, I think people don't need to know this. And these memoirs you are putting together are a mistake.
I didn't ask that.
You didn't need to. But I know my thoughts don't matter. The city isn't ready for the truth. Not about her, and certainly not about Clean Cut. And you can put that on the record.
It was her dying wish to let people know the truth about Clean Cut.
That's not what this is about. I know you too well to let you lie to me.
The council chambers had been prepared for my final meeting. It still took place in Redemption's old office, but over the years we had renovated the place. Instead of building a new oval table, we had a table set into a half circle with single table in the center for guests or applicants to speak, where everyone could look at them easily. It was set up in such a way that the applicants were always facing towards the window, which now had a stained glass portrait of Clean Cut. I had demanded it years ago, a joke that only I would get. The councillors were the same, with few exceptions. High General Steelwing didn't feel it necessary to join meetings himself and sent a representative in Flair, who spent most of his council time quipping back and forth at Molly. That stubborn mule was still there, of course. I had long suspected she would outlast everyone else in the city by sheer will. Paladin Lemoncake and Screenshot, who long since went by the name Photo Finish, though I never called her that, were unmoved as well. The NCA had been absent from the council for years after their civil war kicked off in earnest, but there was still a spot left open for them. The Thiese, or what was left of them, had a seat as well, and was occupied by a cybernetic unicorn I had never met in my time working for Mr. House. Then, finally, in the middle of the table was Redemption. She glared daggers at me from where I stood at the visitors' podium. She barely even tried to hide her contempt for me these days. Years of hatred boiling in her blood from what I did to her dad. Yet, when it came down to it, she listened. "How long will you be gone?" she was asking me, though she knew the answer. Visitors were allowed in seating off to the side, and the seats were almost always full, so she had to put on a show. "If I survive, 2 years. We wish you a speedy return. Dice thanks you for your many years of service. Without you, we all would not be here today," she was saying through gritted teeth. She didn't mean it, but it didn't matter. She would be rid of me soon enough.
Alright, so name and relationship to hired gun. You know who I am. Fine. You've become quite a little buzzy bee since you returned, my little hard worker. I'm Molly, counselor, leader, and owner-operator of the largest casino of the Strip. Hired gun is my mortal enemy. Or was. She got over it, as did I. Where have you been since the Battle of Dice? Here, in Dice. We spent years repairing the damage, and some pony had to rule, so it was to me and the others. Celestia knows why I bother, but like a moth to the flame, I am attracted to hard jobs. I dare say we did a good job. You'd not even know a casino was where the moon once stood. Oh, how Roy would cry to see. The thought brings a smile to my face. And yes, of course, peace and prosperity are plenty, for the most part. We've had a few troubles in the years since the war, but they were always crushed. Personally, I have made myself quite wealthy selling radiated gunk to Equestria, or the NCR, whatever fool name they gave themselves. I suspect the Alicorn's base in it. And what do you think of hired gun? We're mortal enemies, remember? She's a dangerous bitch, and she gnaws on grievances like a dog with a bone. We have that in common. But she's a dangerous idiot. Why she is so beloved in the city, I'll never know. Still, I would not want to be on her bad side. Assuming she still lives, does she? No more questions. Thank you for your time, Molly.
There used to be a statue in the central crossroads of the city. I met the Batmare there once. It was a relic from before the war, but it was crushed and destroyed when the raptor fell on it. Years later I had it replaced, and we had a huge ceremony to celebrate it. It was meant to immortalize the battle that nearly tore the city apart, and our strength to make it through. 4 ponies were carved from stone we had imported from the new Equestrian Republic. The first was Pinprick, though she had never looked so clean in person as she did in the statue, and I had suspected the carver did not have a proper picture and had to use word of mouth because she looked off. Beside her was me, towering above the others, with a grim look on my face. Beside me was Clean Cut. Perhaps his inclusion was what gave me such a grim look, but we all had to pretend, for the good of the city. In front of us was a small colt. I had told the carver he represented the will of the city, that we were protecting. In reality he was post-haste, the colt I killed outside Kharkov. It wasn't proper penance, but it was the least I could do. "You're looking well," a voice said to me as I stared up at the statues, my mind wandering. It did that a lot lately. "Flair?" I said, smiling at the blue Pegasus who walked up beside me. He was looking older, his eyes weathered and the tips of his mane graying ever so slightly. He was young still, but not much longer.
Don't lie.
His one wing flicked a little bit at the accusation. He had never gotten a replacement like he wanted, and he seemed to take pride in that. I meant the statue, he said with a laugh. He looked me over from hoofs to ear. You look like shit in person. So today's the day?
Yes,
I said, tearing my eyes away from him. There was pity in his eyes. I hated it.
Are you sure you don't want to come? We could use you out there.
I have work here, Flair said with a laugh. Had stallions to date. Well, stallion, he said with a surprisingly genuine stallion. I know you and High Stakes don't get along, but we've been working it out. We'll be here when you get back, though, he said, placing his wing on my back. I shuddered at the touch.
I won't be coming back,
I eventually said to break the silence. We stared at the statue for minutes before he eventually replied. I know.
Let's get this over with. Name and relationship to hired gun.
Smooth tongue. I was her former boss after a fashion. She quit in a particularly spectacular way. Did she ever tell you the story, little one?
Yes, you do not come off well in it.
I suppose not. A shame. We could have gotten along famously.
Whatever. So, what have you been doing since the battle for Thiese? The one you didn't help with.
Why would I participate? I'm many kilometers from the city and had no real connection despite my loyal lieutenant having lands closer, and his personal relationship to Hired. It was nothing to us. I admit we have profited generously after the fight. Trade has flourished between the NCR and Thiese, and CR goes through us. It has been enough to set us up as a more respectable organization, to stake large swaths of lands and defend it. We have achieved a level of peace and security that outshines even...
Yeah. What do you think of hired gun, and hurry up with it?
I've known her longer than you, so I will speak for whatever length I deem appropriate. To be frank, I thought she was dumb. When she lived in Mereford, there was some concern her size and anger would pose a problem, but they didn't until the end. She passively did her job, barely speaking safe to her family, except for her brother. Shall I speak of him as well? He is doing well in his position. He would like to...
I don't want to hear about Summer Silk.
If these are her memoirs, I suspect she has notes on the events that took place here in regards to the Child Foundation. I would like the opportunity to explain what...
I don't want to hear it. This was a mistake. Goodbye, Smooth Tongue.
Must you take her with you? We have found her help invaluable, Platinum Haze said, looking down at me. In the intervening years, she was able to move her orphanage to a new building that was made from the parts salvaged from the wreckage of the moon. It was a nice enough building, even as her orphans got older and older, which is what happened when you killed fewer people.
She wants to go, and you know her when she sets her mind to something.
Haze and I shared a small room on the top floor of her orphanage. Sometimes I would help with the kids, but I was never as good at it as I would have liked. We know, but we have often found with the right motivation. She sighed a little and gave me a warm smile. We would never take her away from you. We will make do, as we always have. I couldn't help but look at her wing when she said that. It was mangled oddly during the fighting and had never really healed. She could fly, but not for long, and not without pain. If it bothered her, she didn't show it. She never did. I'm proud of everything you have accomplished.
Thank you.
I moved closer to rest my head on her chest. This was one of the few places I could just be, without worrying about who I was being. I needed it.
I don't think I'm coming back. I'm scared.
She wrapped a warm wing around me and just let me continue.
I don't want to die. I thought I did, but...
I took a deep, sharp breath as she gently rubbed my back with a wing.
I'm sorry,
We know, she said softly, her wings still rubbing up and down my back comfortingly. I love you too.
Name and relationship with hired gun. Sweetie, is this really necessary? You know whom we are. Alright, we cannot withstand that look. We are Platinum Haze. We were hired gun's mare friend for many years. What have you been doing since the Battle of Dice? You know this as well. Oh, very well. We have been continuing our work with the followers of the apocalypse. Specifically, we have spent the years working at, maintaining, and supporting our orphanage. We are pleased to say that with every passing year our services become less and less necessary, but we shall continue to provide them until they are no longer needed at all. What do you think of hired gun? We love her. Oh, did you want more? Very well. We have always found her a difficult pony to love. We mean this not as an insult, but a statement of fact. All who know her to be quiet, distant, and troubled. However, the undeniable strength in her, it is hard not to admire, to find joy in. We found it worth it, despite the trouble. She is a person you warm up to, not one who you have a strong first impression of. And her violent tendencies? We are not a leash, sweet. We go our path, and she has gone her. And thus we all are happy. We cannot fault all her actions. We disagree, and she had done much to bring peace, not all through violence, as we have asked of her. Disappointed? No, that's not it. Thank you for your time. Dee, are you okay? You have been spending too much time on this project. Perhaps you should take a break. I'm fine.
It was days walking north. We made the trip faster many times, but I walked slowly and rested often. I hated feeling this way, but I knew there was nothing I could do. If there was one comfort I could take, it was that Serenity didn't complain at all. When we stopped yet again for me to catch my breath, she just got to starting to bundle sticks for a fire. She turned into a finer mare than me. Tall, though not so tall as me. Thin and elegant. She was graceful on her hoofs, and with her hoofs, moving with a dexterity I couldn't hope to match. As she grew, she picked up my penchant for quietness, but never forgot her playfulness. She glanced over at me, staring at her, and brushed a long strand of mane out of her eyes before chucking a stick at me.
No moping, Mama. I told you, it's forbidden.
My joints creaked as I brought up my metal leg to shield from another thrown stick. At least my cybernetics never got tired.
Who told you that you were in charge? Did you want to fight about it, Mama?
She said, raising an eyebrow, walking up to me to size me up.
I thought not,
she said, tapping her hoof against my nose before I had the chance to respond. The metal felt cold on my nose.
You know what? I'm feeling better. I guess we should head back,
I said, chuckling as she returned to the bundle of sticks. She lifted her hoof at it, and then, swoosh! A small jet of flame came pouring out of it. I never approved of her getting cybernetics on purpose. To me, it seemed morbid. But she was old enough to make her own decisions, and she spent years designing them just for herself.
Not a chance. We're going to get to the zebra lands and fix you right up,
she said, more confidently than I ever could.
Serenity,
I started to say, but she turned back to me, her sad grey eyes pleading with me. She had to believe, I realized. I had to leave her with that. We both knew it was a lie, but what else did I have to give but lies?
Of course. We're near Brittlehoof,
she mentioned, changing the subject rapidly. I hadn't been back there since my falling out with my brother, when the Crimson Hoof took over.
Are we going to stop by and see Uncle? No,
I said firmly.
Do you think he'll want to know what he did?
It was his fault after all. The lines of blue that were keeping across the skin. The fatigue. The constant pain. I was dying, and because of a mistake he made. A mistake I made. He shot me with poison from outer space. It was funny when I thought myself invincible, but now the joke had faded.
But Mama, don't you?
She looked back at me with a grin. She was always smiling and upbeat, except her eyes. Her eyes always seemed sad, now more so than ever.
Never mind. Food shouldn't take too long, but you could take a nap. It's a long journey north to the port.
Well, are we to get started?
Huh? Sorry, I was distracted. I was still hoping Major Lucky or Major General Haystorm would have responded by now.
I'm never good enough for you, am I, kid? You're not likely to find them. I've got reports from the NCA and their civil war hasn't let up. You know how the NCA was formed, right? I guess it doesn't matter. Suffice to say, old grudges are hard to hide without a common enemy like the Minotaurs.
Where did they even go? Oh, sorry, right, interview. Please state your name and relationship to Hired Gun.
Paladin Curly Fries from the Applejack Rangers. And she was my ally? Enemy? I suppose it depends on the day.
Where have you been since the Battle of Thiese?
Through the Applejack Rangers, I have helped them on their new mission as agreed upon. We have maintained border security around Thiese and helped tame out outland areas Thiese claims to hold. You're welcome. We also have spent considerable resources studying the technology in the mountain facility. You would be amazed at the secrets of megaspells we have uncovered.
I'm sure I would. What do you think of Hired Gun?
She ruined my life, then saved it. I've long suspected that the rocks on her flanks were for the rubble she left behind. But the way she handled Thiese, the way she led it, she didn't have to do what she did. It was impressive. Despite that, I might still hate her.
It's still all your fault, Curly Fries.
What?
Never mind.
We had stopped in the Mare Fort, the last stop before we hit Equestria proper. I never saw Smooth Tongue, though he knew I was coming. Despite everything, it was good to be home. To see people I hadn't seen in so long. To hear stories of what I missed. To walk the halls and walkways and huddled cramped buildings like I had never left at all. I never had many friends in the Mare Fort, but my stories had spread enough they were glad to see me. It was burdensome. It wasn't home. It hadn't been home for so long. It felt cramped. Old. Like a storybook I read as a kid that no longer held up to scrutiny as a mare. I couldn't sleep, so I went for a walk. Serenity was snoring gently and had kicked her blankets off, so I carefully tucked her in before I left. She was a full-grown mare, but I still hated to think of how she'd live without me looking after her. She was going to get into so much trouble. Still, I needed to walk. Mind you, I had to take Med-X to stomach the pain walking caused. The night was deathly dark, like it was before the cloud cover was opened. With my cybernetic eye I could still see, but barely. It was fine though. I liked the dark. And I needed to think. 7 years is a long time, and so much had happened. I gave my life for Thiese. I brought the city together. I built it up after everything that happened. There was the council, sure, but whenever something went wrong they looked to me to fix it. And fix it I did, with all my power and all my might, even as my strength faded. As my voice grew weak, I stood tall, for Thiese, for a home. I had so few years left and I gave them to that city. I regretted it at times. The way I slaved over the city. They would never know me, the real me, the truth behind what happened. How could I not hate them for that? Hate them for never realizing what I did, what Clean Cut did. And they would have hated me back. Liar, murderer, hero killer, foal killer. Everything that Thiese was my mess, was my lies. Perhaps that is why I chose to stay, because I felt like I had to. I chained myself to the idea of being their hero, even as I hated it some days. I stared south, peering through the gloom and the darkness I felt for a minute, that I could see it. The light rising from over the mountain hills and deserts. The diamond of the south. The desert jewel. The home I built. The mistakes I made. After everything that happened, they deserved to know the truth. I stayed for duty, not love. I was a monster, only slightly better than clean cut, and all their myth and heroes were charlatans. I wouldn't be there to tell them, but they'd know. Serenity had already started to write my memoirs when we rested. My legs grew tired, but I knew where I was. So I stopped and took a seat. Before me were 2 stone graves, preserved in time. In the darkness of the night, even with my cybernetic eye, I could not read the names engraved in the stone. I didn't need to. I knew the name. I lowered my head. This place deserved reverence.
I'm sorry. I love you. I will see you soon.
I whispered in the dark. I could only pray they would recognize me.
All right, your turn.
What are you talking about, Flair? I just came to check on how the editing is.
Fine. I'm a professional after all. See my butt? Ha! But it was incomplete. It needed something, and I realized what? A testimonial from Hired Gun's daughter. State your name and relationship to Hired Gun.
I'm Serenity, and I'm her daughter.
Where have you been since the battle for Thiese's soul?
Flair, is this really... Oh, fine. I have been working with the Watchers to help reform them. I did spend a lot of time on personal projects. I was still a kid after all.
Still are? Why else would you be writing this? So tell me, what do you think of Hired Gun?
What kind of question is that? She's my mother. I love her with all my heart.
How did she die?
Flair, that's not one of the questions.
We can edit it out later, just answer.
You don't know what it was like over there. You didn't see her as I saw her. She had been so strong. To see her so weak, so feeble. We barely made it there, and when we were in the Zebra Lands, it's not something I want to talk about. I can't. I'm sorry.
That's when Silver Storm died, not Hired Gun. Hired Gun will die when this book of yours gets published. It was a trick question, but since you brought her up, what do you think of Silver Storm?
Flair, what are you getting at?
What did you think of Silver Storm? Your adopted mother's. After everything that happened, did you really love her?
Of course.
Did you really forgive her?
What?
There's more to this than letting people know about Clean Cut. I'm not stupid. I've known you too long, little filly. Tell me, can you really forgive her for Kharkov? What she did? What she made you watch? Everyone will know the truth soon enough. Everyone will face it. But you need to first. Do you forgive her for killing post-haste?
Flair, you can't... No. I don't forgive her. You want the truth? Fine. The truth is that I never did. And never will. Not for that. Everyone wants to remember the dead fondly, but why? People need to know the truth about her. About Clean Cut. About everything. We never should have lied. So here's the truth. I love her. Despite everything. But I still dream of that moment. I can't forget. I can't let go. People deserve to know their heroes. As I do.
Okay, normally this would be the moment where I say this is Common Time with Visual Pony and all that, but sorry, but I can't. I can't. Have a good day, everyone.
We here at Pony&Wolf Productions thank these amazing patrons of ours for their monthly support, without which all of this would not be possible. We sincerely appreciate it, and every dollar helps, is needed, and will be used to keep us going to produce audiobooks for your continued enjoyment. It is, now more than ever, important that you support your favorite creators if possible, due to YouTube changing in a way that is not very friendly to content creators. Especially small content creators, like us. In recent months, the names you see on screen have enabled Midnight and Visual Pony to keep going and only having to sell off part of their belongings to not end up on the street. As an incentive for everyone, Visual Pony has broken a vow and has promised to read and record FalloutEquestria, Murky number 7, should the monthly support reach $1,500. To be clear, this is the absolute minimum amount needed to keep the apartment and all bills paid without starving, while a production of this size is ongoing. The estimated time for this production would be 3 to 4 years, but people already said that Project Horizons was impossible to do, right? And now look who did it, so with Pony and Wolf, you know we can finish the job. For further information on how to support us, please have a look at the description of this video, as there are also other ways, like our merch store. Sincerely and forever yours, your Pony and Wolf team.